Now the latest from ITV News Meridian with Fred Dinage and Sangeeta Barbara.
Good evening, welcome to ITV News Meridian.
Tonight's headlines in the south. Failings in the treatment of road rage killer Matthew Daly. Now an NHS trust reveals its review of 9 more killings.
And after the death of a vulnerable teenager, a health trust for Hampshire and Dorset comes under fire again from its own governors.
Also tonight, the train can't take the strain. Why 600,000 commuters are about to get caught up in strike action.
And heartbreak for the Seagulls, who suffer playoff semi-final defeat for the 3rd time in 4 seasons. Good evening to you. NHS managers in Sussex have begun the task of reviewing the cases of 9 more killings involving people or patients in their care after severe failings in the treatment of a road rage killer.
Matthew Daly was found guilty of stabbing to death great-grandfather Don Locke after a minor crash between their cars in Findon near Worthing in July last year.
Sussex Partnership NHS Foundation Trust had rejected pleas from Daly's family to have him sectioned under the Mental Health Act. With the full story, Malcolm Shaw.
I reached out with that and it went into his arm. And then I reached out with it again and it went into his body.
Matthew Daly describes the moment he stabbed Don Locke to death. Daly had been diagnosed with Asperger's, a form of autism, but doctors also knew he experienced psychotic episodes, hearing voices and suffering delusions. The Mental Health Trust responsible for Daly's care accepts he should have been treated for paranoid schizophrenia, and it's now launched an investigation into 10 killings involving former patients.
NHS England will carry out a review with an independent review and determine whether or not this was predictable or preventable, and we will cooperate entirely with that review.
News of the review came as the family of Don Locke gave a media conference after yesterday's verdict. They appeared stunned by the revelation.
I would say all that does is just exacerbate the problem that they've got.
The 10 cases now under review go back almost a decade. They include that of David Soul, who'd been treated for mental illness but beat a disabled man to death with a baseball bat. Also Janet Muller, who went missing from a mental health unit in Hove and then became a victim of homicide. Her body found in a burnt-out car near Crawley. And Roger Goswell, who stabbed his wife to death at their home in West Chiltington before killing himself. The 66-year-old had been released from a psychiatric clinic days before. Joseph Goswell says his father had repeatedly threatened to kill his mother, but he claims the authorities ignored the family's warnings.
We told the NHS, we told them, and they weren't listening. And that's the tragic thing. And to this day, I'm speaking for my mother because our voice wasn't heard.
The trial heard that Matthew Daly's parents had pleaded for him to receive better treatment and even to be sectioned. Experts say his case is far from unique.
There is a long cultural tradition that families get in the way, that it's the patient who is the focus of attention, and confidentiality often rules over common sense.
The family of Don Locke believe his death could have been avoided if Matthew Daly's mental illness had been treated more effectively, making their loss all the harder to bear.
He was the most wonderful husband for 55 years. He was the other half of my life. And there's an empty house now without him.
An independent panel of experts will now review the 10 homicide cases and publish their findings. The Trust says it wants the public to feel reassured that lessons have been learned from these tragic incidents. But when we spoke to the mother of one of the victims of the killings today, she was shocked to hear about this new investigation. Our call to her was the first she'd been told about it. Malcolm Shaw, ITV News, Brighton.
Well, the MP for Worthing, where Don Lock's family live, is Sir Peter Bottomley. He's been speaking to our political correspondent, Phil Hornby.
Well, the Lock family's MP, Sir Peter Bottomley, he's with me now. Sir Peter, what are your thoughts at the end of this terrible case?
Well, we all recognise it's a tragedy. The biggest tragedy is for Don Lock's family. I think we also need to recognise that the mental health services have done an incredible amount of good for most people. They've apologised both to their patient, but even more importantly now to Don Lock's family. The issue, I think, is what can we learn from it, and can we go on reducing the amount of risk, both risk to patients if they aren't diagnosed properly and risk to those around them. A point I would want to make is often we want to go and blame those who've been trying to cope. If I'd been a patient with the Partnership Trust for, say, 7 years, the people most at risk if I am dangerous are actually the people caring for me, who are the mental health nurses, the assistants. So I don't think we should start attacking people. We do need to learn, and I trust Colin Doherty and his team at the Partnership Trust to do that.
There is talk of 10 other deaths being investigated now. How concerned, how worried should people be?
Well, I don't think people should be more worried than they were before, because the number of deaths involving patients like this and people with conditions like this has been reducing. If you go back over the last 40 years, we're far more sensitive. And the other plea I'd make to everybody is that if you have someone in your family who has got mental conditions or mental illness or something like that, it's very important to be able to talk openly. So in the same way we can now talk about our stroke, we can now talk about dementia and Alzheimer's, we ought to be able to talk about some of the other things. Psychosis is one of them, but it's only one of the conditions. And it's very difficult to judge exactly who's going to do what. We tragically don't need to excuse what happens, we need to learn from it, but we also ought to pay tribute and stand with those who are the caring services who pick up all the difficult issues that we bring forward.
Sir Peter Bottomley, thank you very much indeed. Clearly, the message is there are lots of lessons to be learnt.
Phil Hornby there. We're staying with social care. There was further trouble today at another NHS trust that's already under fire for failing vulnerable people.
A meeting by the Board of Governors was due to take place at Southern Health with a possible vote of no confidence in its Chief Executive, Katrina Percy. But the meeting was cancelled, and instead a small group of governors took questions from the public.
Well, the trust, which covers Hampshire and Dorset, has been criticised for failing to properly investigate the unexpected deaths of around 1,000 people since 2011.
Connor Sparrowhawk, who was 18, had epilepsy. He drowned in a bath while unsupervised at a learning disability unit run by Southern Health in July 2013.
The trust accepts his death could have been prevented. With the latest, Richard Slee.
This is the meeting the Health Trust tried to stop.
Those lies are just being repeated and repeated and repeated, and nothing's changing.
Maureen Rickman is speaking passionately about her sister's suicide and the lack of accountability at Southern Health. Listening is the Trust's newest governor, Peter Bell. He called this meeting to try and force a vote of no confidence in the Board of Management. But after pressure from the Trust's chairman, just 3 of the other 18 governors attended, and they didn't want to appear on camera.
Do we have the right people at the right time? And that's the question the governors are asking the board and the non-execs and the execs to consider is, are the best people leading the trust? A, to move away from the crisis point it's in, and B, to get back to the aim, which is to be the best it can be.
Just a few weeks ago, the Southern Health Trust, led by Chief Executive Katrina Percy, was heavily criticised by a health watchdog. The Care Quality Commission found that the Trust didn't do enough to protect patients, didn't sufficiently investigate unexpected deaths, and had very poor leadership. One former Southern Health employee who didn't want to be identified told me today that after working in an acute mental health unit for 15 months, she quit last Friday.
I could never work in a place where if I saw the safety of patients at risk, where I could ignore it and shut my mouth.
And you thought that was happening?
Yes, and it was being ignored by senior management.
But according to the Trust's new chairman, now is not the time to call for heads to roll. Tim Smart says any rash decision could be open to a legal challenge.
When I'm confident that we have a coherent strategy that will deliver improvement in the quality of care and the patient safety and the issues that have been identified in the many reports that go back a long time, then I will communicate that to the public.
There is clearly a disagreement going on within the Trust about how to deal with its poor leadership. And it's an issue that some governors hope will not end up in the courts, costing public money that would be better spent on patient care. Richard Slee, ITV News.
More news now, and the family of a cyclist hit by a lorry have paid tribute to a very special man. Father of two, Alessandro Filippic from Southampton, died in hospital after the collision on East Park Terrace. He was 63. His relatives say he will be deeply missed by family and friends here and in Italy.
A man who was injured in an alleged assault at a holiday park has died in hospital. 64-year-old Kenneth Dickey was found with a head injury at the Rockley Park site in Bournemouth in Dorset on the 8th of May. A 34-year-old man from Poole has been charged with committing grievous bodily harm.
You're watching ITV News here in the Meridian region. Thank you very much for choosing us. Coming up.
Well, if you've been using your brolly as a sunshade this last couple of days, prepare to find out what it does best. Can you guess what the change in the weather might be?
Simon, it's either a heat wave or a monsoon, and my money is on the latter, but we shall see a little bit later. Don't forget to take a look at our website, itv.com/Meridian. You can give us a call. Here's the number, 0808 1010 095, or get in touch via Facebook, or why not send us a tweet at ITV Meridian.
Hundreds of thousands of rail passengers face major disruption from midnight tonight into tomorrow because of the latest strike by guards at Southern trains. They're angry at plans that would see drivers closing train doors.
Well, the action will hit many services in Kent, Sussex and Surrey. Today saw a war of words between managers and the RMT union over safety and jobs. Southern accuses the union of a disgraceful campaign of misinformation. With more, our transport correspondent, Mike Pearce.
From midnight, hundreds of guards will refuse to work their trains and will instead head for the picket line. It means 600,000 passengers face misery.
Some lines will have no trains, some lines will have restricted trains, and we encourage everyone to look and check their travel before they travel. We are intending to run as many trains as we can.
It's not really our problem. We pay a high price for our rail fares. And I think we deserve a good service from Upfield, to be honest.
Well, I've got to go to Haywards Heath tomorrow. I can't go from here. I've got to get somebody to drop me off, a taxi to drop me off at Haywards Heath station. So it's just a pain, for everybody, really.
We were given exclusive access to film the technology at the centre of the dispute. Southern want drivers rather than guards to close train doors to give the conductors more time to look after passengers. Trains have the latest CCTV, so every door is monitored by drivers. But the unions say safety is at risk. On this Great Western train, the driver responsible for closing the doors didn't see a passenger getting off. A hand became trapped in the doors, pulling her with the train. Southern use new improved CCTV and insist it's safe.
All the evidence shows that driver-only operation is a safe way of operation. We already operate most of our trains on GTR using driver-only, and we already operate 40% of our trains on Southern using driver-only. So it is a safe way of operation.
And you would say no job cuts?
We've made a firm guarantee that there will be no job cuts and everyone will retain the same salary. That's a firm guarantee we've made to our people.
As things stand at the moment, there are no new peace talks planned. In fact, both sides seem as far apart as ever, with Southern saying if there's no negotiated settlement, they'll simply impose their plans. But while the row goes on, passengers will be suffering once again. Mike Pearce, ITV News.
In London for us now, Paul Cox from the RMT union. Mr. Cox, thank you so much for joining us. 600,000 passengers facing disruption from midnight with a 24-hour strike. How do you respond to accusations you are being unreasonable and uncaring?
Absolutely not. We don't want to cause any disruption to the public, but we have to express our discontent with Southern Railway's proposals to remove the safety critical role from the conductor.
Southern Trains say there'll be no job losses, no pay cuts, so this argument is all about who closes the doors, is it?
Absolutely not, Fred. I think they would like you to believe that it's just about closing doors, but the safety critical guard has many other safety functions, the most essential of which is to protect a train in an emergency or when the driver is incapacitated. For instance, if the train strikes something and it comes off the track, an oncoming train could collide with it, and drivers and conductors are trained to prevent that.
So when are you and the train company going to sit down and sort this out once and for all? When's this misery for passengers going to be ended?
Fred, I'll be there in 10 minutes if they're going to be realistic about their objectives. We have offered major concessions to them. We will sit down and talk about anything as long as they agree that the safety critical role of the conductor is maintained.
Let's hope that meeting takes place soon. Paul Cox, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you, Fred.
Well, our transport correspondent Mike Pearce is with us now. Mike, what is going to settle this then?
I think things are going from bad to worse. I think that the real issue is this, that while Southern say there are no job cuts, what they can't guarantee is that every single train will have a second member of staff. And that's why the RMT have suspicions about the future and say they simply will not agree to this change without that. And without really some negotiations and agreement, we're actually stalemate.
So we can expect more strike days then, can we?
Yeah, my guess is that Southern, if there is no talks, what they will do is they will implement this move they want to, a change in the role of the guard so that the drivers actually close the doors. They will implement that. And I think that will lead to more strike days, yes.
Mike, thank you.
More of the day's news now, and forensic experts have been trying to work out what caused a caravan to burst into flames on a residential street in Sussex. 2 bungalows on Cissbury Avenue in Peacehaven had to be evacuated when the motorhome exploded last night. Police say arson hasn't been ruled out.
Sussex police are warning Brighton residents about the danger of telephone fraud after 4 elderly people were conned out of thousands of pounds. They received phone calls persuading them to hand over their debit cards to courier drivers. The oldest victim was 88.
The Home Secretary has been addressing the Police Federation conference in Bournemouth. Theresa May, who's also MP for Maidenhead, said the Federation needed to reform itself further and police must do more to tackle domestic abuse. But she saved her strongest message to condemn the police response to the Hillsborough disaster and the way victims were failed by the authorities.
Never forget that those that died in that disaster of the 27 years of hurt endured by their families and loved ones. Let the hostility, the obfuscation and the attempts to blame the fans serve as a reminder of the need for change.
The world's largest cruise ship has docked in Southampton ahead of its maiden voyage. Harmony of the Seas took 2.5 years to build at a cost of £800 million. Stood on its stern, the Royal Caribbean ship would be taller than the Eiffel Tower. Small crowds have been gathering to catch a glimpse before it sets sail to Barcelona later this month.
Fast approaching 19 minutes past 6 and the ITV evening news continues with the national and the international news at 6:30. Let's now get a preview to London. Alistair Stewart.
Up to 31 athletes from 12 countries in 6 different sports could be banned from the Rio Olympics. They were found to have cheated when samples taken at the 2008 Beijing Games were retested with the latest scientific equipment. Banks urge to cut costs for customers by setting a maximum charge for unplanned overdrafts. A missed opportunity, say the critics, and...
Infamy! Infamy! They've all got it in for me!
Carry on for Carry On, why the classic British film is set to make a comeback. Join Mary Nightingale and me at 6:30.
Thank you, Alistair. And what a shame for Brighton.
They was
night.
robbed.
They was. Here's Sarah Gone.
Such a disappointment, wasn't it? Thank you, Sangeeta. Yes, Brighton boss Chris Hughton says the disappointment is massive after the club suffered playoff semi-final defeat for the third time in 4 seasons. The Albion were denied a Wembley final by Sheffield Wednesday, a team that finished 3 places and 15 points beneath them in the Championship table.
ITV Meridian Sports Report, sponsored by WeWantAnyCar.com, the Cash for Cars website.
Despite a 2-goal deficit from Friday night's first leg, it seemed there was as much spirit among fans off the pitch as there was to be amongst the Brighton players on it.
I felt all the way through this season that Brighton had got the ability to do it, and I'm convinced that tonight is the night.
It's only 2 goals. We can do it. Why not?
You've got to believe, you've got to stay together. That's what we've been told, and that's what we're going to do tonight.
And Chris Hughton's team looked every inch the side that had begun this season with a 21-game unbeaten run and finished the campaign 15 points above last night's opponents. No team has ever overturned a 2-goal deficit to reach a playoff final. The Albion looked like they were about to change that, with Anthony Knockaert in the side, having recovered from injury at Hillsborough, and Lewis Dunk back from suspension. Both began this game with a fiery determination to beat the odds. And the pair combined on 19 minutes to send their side 1 up. But just 10 minutes later, Brighton's resolve took a massive dent as Ross Wallace sent his cross goal-bound, condemning his opponents to a 3rd Championship playoff semi-final defeat in 4 seasons.
Things have gone against us, I think, in the last few weeks, and their goal was certainly a foul on Dunk. So that makes it tougher. I think if we kept it at 1-0, we know that there's a very long period still in this game to get a second goal. So that was really disappointing and frustrating, but I certainly can't fault the endeavour from the players and the way that the players went about trying to get this deficit back.
I'll have to be automatic promotion next season. Right, Southampton goalkeeper Kelvin Davis says his testimonial game at St Mary's tonight will be his last in a Saints shirt. Davis's 10 years at the club will be celebrated this evening when a Promotions 11 managed by former boss Nigel Adkins takes on members of Ronald Koeman's current squad. Favourites, including Ricky Lambert, are set to return to St Mary's. A fleet of coaches has set off from Bournemouth to Old Trafford this afternoon, taking fans to tonight's postponed match between the Cherries and Manchester United. The supporters, who travelled north to the stadium on Sunday, have been given free transport by Bournemouth and free entry from United, following the fake bomb scare that led to the game being abandoned.
For me, I'm retired, and I took the chance to go to Old Trafford because it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance maybe for me.
I'm excited about it, really excited. Yeah, loving it, looking forward to it. It was our first time to Old Trafford on Sunday, so it's a bit of an anti-climax, but yeah, I think we'll do the points this time.
Obviously safety is paramount, but yeah, we're still happy, we're still going.
And Hampshire captain James Vince says he's going to relish every moment as he hopes to make his Test debut for England this week. The 25-year-old batsman is set to feature in the middle order as England take on Sri Lanka at Headingley. He says the reality of his call-up is slowly sinking in after joining up with his new Test teammates.
Very exciting. Dinner last night, and that's sort of when it sank in, really. Long drive up yesterday, so had a bit of time to think in the car. But it's great to be here and can't wait to get going now. And if I do get the chance to take the field, it'll be a very proud moment.
Yeah, he did hit a century for Hampshire at Leeds a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully that bodes well, and that match is set to begin at 11 on Thursday morning, weather permitting, of course.
Permitting forecast coming up. Thanks, Sarah. Now, 100 years ago, you'd struggle to see one. Almost hunted out of existence, the buzzard was a rare sight in our region.
But thanks to a special breeding programme, they're now soaring above our skies once again.
Yes, numbers have risen by thousands, and you can spot them circling over grassland, woodland and farmland, as Lauren Hall will tell us.
Heading out for a spot of bird watching. And it's not long before they identify a couple of buzzards.
I think there's 1 or 2 over there just gliding
Oh yeah,
around. Yeah.
They've become a common sight here in the south.
In the last few years, I see them almost every day. It's fantastic.
Yeah. They're beautiful, and the way they hang out
together is really lovely to see.
At one time, your best chance of seeing a buzzard was at a bird of prey centre. In recent years, though, there's been a huge increase in their numbers, with more and more of us seeing them in the wild.
The buzzards are a really easy one to spot naturally in the wild. They've got a lovely round, deep wingspan, and quite often they have white patches on the underside of each wing as well. And I think when people get to recognise them and they can spot them, they can really enjoy them in their natural environment.
Buzzards have made a real comeback after hunting during the Victorian era drastically reduced their population to around 1,000 breeding pairs. Now it's up to 68,000, and they've spread across the south and into other parts of the UK.
Well, these maps show the whole story of buzzards in the UK. So here you can see how things were at the late 19th century. So these E's show all the areas that buzzards has been lost from, where they'd gone extinct. By the 1970s into the 1980s, you can see they've started to expand out across Britain. And then right up to the modern day, this is the most up-to-date map, and you can see almost covering the whole country.
It's welcome news for the RSPB. The wildlife conservation charity says it gives them hope for other birds of prey.
When we get legal protection, improved attitudes and real conservation measures for their habitat as well, when we get everything right, species can come back spectacularly. And it gives us great hope for some of the other species that still aren't doing so well, that if we can get things right, we can still help them too.
Buzzards are now our most common bird of prey, a remarkable recovery, which means once again they dominate the skies above us. Lauren Hall, ITV News.
Simon's here now to tell us what's been nesting in his inbox. Simon.
Yes, indeed. The things that have been dominating our nest boxes. Very interesting. Have a look at this video. This is from Pete Grange. And do you know what that is?
No. Are they birdies?
They are birdies, but in a bird box. The clues are there. They are, in fact, tawny owl chicks. Look, aren't they sweet? But this is from Jill Mackay's garden, where each morning that sparrow with the nice-looking moustache goes and picks up what, I hear you cry? Only the clippings from Jenny the dog, and that is Jenny the dog, to make a nice nest. Speaking of a nest, Trevor Baker in Bracknell has sent in this. He was at Lavels Nature Reserve near Reading and spotted a swan sitting on an impressive nest. He then spotted the cheeky coot who kept swimming by and nicking some of it for his own nest. Look, you won't want to take on a swan, would you? And Tina Russell has robins that have moved into her porch. She says they're feeding like crazy but sit in the window quite proudly. And finally, Lisa Caswell-Newton, you probably know they're baby robins that are in the Works cardboard crusher out the back. So any other unusual places for nests, we'd love to see them.
Rain?
Probably.
Probably. Don't believe me. Here he is, Simon Parkin.
From blizzards to pool, driving through Europe. Eurotunnel the Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
So can you spot from the subtle clue what might be the change in the weather? As we speak, there is a bit of rain heading our way. Now, overnight tonight, it'll just be a bit of light, patchy stuff. But tomorrow morning, we're going to see more heavy rain arrive, and that's going to wash its way across the region, followed by some very heavy showers with the risk of some thunder thrown in as well. So turning a bit unsettled, to say the least. But because of the cloud increasing through tonight, well, at least it's mild. Temperatures generally staying up into double figures. And like I say, a few spots of light rain here and there, but nothing too major. First thing tomorrow morning, particularly in the east, you might wake up to a dry start, but fairly quickly we're going to see that rain start to push in and spread its way through, blown on by some quite strong winds, so fairly foul conditions for a time. And then once that's blown through, we'll see the showers developing into the afternoon. Some thunder is quite possible, some of those showers heavy, and as the winds ease, they will be slow moving too. So if one of them lands on you, you'll certainly know about it. And temperatures tomorrow, bit disappointing compared to today, peaking at around 14 or 15 at best. As for your high tide times, you can see in Brighton, 10 past 10 in the morning, half 10 in the evening. And then we should get away with a dry and bright start on Thursday. More rain, though, later.
Eurotunnel the Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
Keeping a close eye on summer. The Pollen Count, sponsored by Ilogy Eye Drops.
Well, if you've been suffering with the scratchy eyes and sniffles, it's actually good news this rain tomorrow, because it does mean the tree pollen levels will be down to moderate. But in any brighter weather for the rest of the week, watch them shoot up to high.
And coming up in just a moment, we've got the ITV Evening News with Alistair Stewart and Mary Nightingale.
Rachel Hepworth's got our late news. Join her if you can. But for now, from the team here at ITV Meridian, thanks for watching. Take care. Join us soon.
Bye-bye.